It can be pretty daunting to begin to work from a photo reference. Where do you start? What do you think about? What do you do? I want to share my approach to doing that in the hopes that it helps you out. So let's get right into it. This particular reference image is by Patrick Ho. I provided his link. Check him out on Unsplash. And let's talk about this. So when I'm looking at a reference, the first thing that I want to do is I want to pay attention to where the shoulder socket is and the opposite shoulder socket. So if we look at that, we can see that there's like an invisible connection going on there. And the next thing I do is I look at the pelvis, and I consider the pelvis to be another cylinder as well. So these two have a through line or a spine that goes between them. This is the first thing that I look at when I'm looking at a photo reference. I'm not worried about detail. I'm not worried about costumes or what the character's face looks like. I'm just simply trying to assess two specific landmarks. And when I'm doing that, I'm also paying attention to how far away the feet are. Like in this particular case, if we look at this foot, it's nearly extended and it's quite a bit of distance. In fact, let me just pull this off to the side so you can see what I'm working with here. Now, typically what I'll do is, if I'm actually drawing this for myself, I don't necessarily draw on the reference unless the reference is a little bit complicated. I tend to work this stuff out here on the side. But if you're learning this, if you're trying to understand that relationship between the shoulders and the pelvis, it's not a bad idea to actually draw on top of the figure on a separate layer, just for your own purposes. All right, so let's go ahead now and let's consider what's going on here. So we've got this cylinder. It's kind of at an angle. We've got the spine here. It looks like we have the pelvis. Pelvis has a tilt as well. It's really important to be able to draw those cylinders in any view. And they will start to show perspective if they're coming out towards the viewer. Like in this case, they have their own vanishing points, etc. So now that I've established that, let's consider the distance between the two caps on the shoulder blade and the pelvis. Well, the cap distance here is shorter than the cap distance from this point right here. So this is going to be what I would consider to be a stretch, and this would be a pinch. I'm going to exaggerate this because my goal here is not to make a photocopy of this reference, but it's to use this reference to create a stylized character that has these, like the costumes and the various attributes. So once I've done that, we know that the arms are going to emanate from the shoulders, so we'll just go ahead and draw a tapered cylinder, like so. And then her arm is bent. Let's draw another tapered cylinder. This is her elbow area. And now I'm looking at, okay, all right, what do the fists look like? It looks like the fists are kind of like in this shape. Again, I'm not working with any detail, just working through basic proportion and figuring out how things look. I'll draw, this is her baseball bat. And I'm going to draw that just so I have an idea of where to place the other hand. I'm going to treat the fingers as one unit in this particular area. And we can also see too that we have part of her lower arm is going to be foreshortened. And we have something like this. Now this is my first pass. There will be some adjustments here. I might have it a little bit too high. In fact, what I can do, the beauty of digitally, is I can lower this and rotate it and get it where I need it to be. There's no harm in doing that whatsoever. All right, and then we had this basic idea of her head. Her head is kind of leaning forward. I'll just represent that like so. Let's merge those two layers in. So we've got those proportions established. Let's now consider the fact that this leg is coming out towards the viewer. This upper leg is in a side view. I'll move this up so I have more room. We're going to give ourselves a little bit of a gap for the kneecap. And we're going to exaggerate that distance. The lower leg in this case is going to be 1.5 times as long as the thigh. And we've got this nice curve going on here. Again, not worried about details at this stage. And then let's now consider the lower leg. So that's me capturing the pose, doing some analysis to try to figure out where the different body parts are at, and I'm drawing through the form, not worried about adding any kind of costuming effects, just looking at the form itself. Let's scale this down a little bit so I have a little bit more room to work with here. Now my next step is, okay, does everything look right? Are the proportions okay? Let's just extend this out by drawing our bat. The bat looks something like this. Her hair is going to be roughly over here. So this looks okay. We can see just a smidgen of the side of her head. And again, I'm not worried about the costume just yet. I'll scale this down. I'll make another copy of it. I'll drop the opacity of the copy. And now let's come back in and figure out how I can improve what I've drawn here. So let's now commit the things that are working. So we've got this jacket. Anytime you have a bend, you're going to have these little fan shapes. It's basically something like this. Wherever the bend occurs, you're going to see a fan shape. And we're going to have that jacket. The jacket kind of bunches up here. We can see another portion of the jacket, like so. Let's go ahead and draw her hands. We can see this thumb is overlapping. Think about the fingers as cylinders. And if we look at the other hand, you can see a little bit of the thumb there. We have our knuckles. Knuckles have some curvature to them. We can see a little bit of her jacket. And now we have butt. There's some creasing going on over here. There's also some creasing going on here. And we've got her boot. So here's where I start to, think about the costume. I'm basically drawing her outfit on top of her armature. The armature is basically this skeletal-like structure. It really helps me out. And this boot is a little bit hard to see from the reference. It looks a bit thicker, but this is a little bit unknown to me. I want to say that looks thicker, but I know that just based upon the other boot, it's going to look like something like this. So I'm going to draw what I know and not try to, assume. Okay, and then now I've got the bat. I'll draw through that form. And let's now capture her head. We got her jawline. Her ear comes from the jawline right here. And then for her actual hair, we see that her hair kind of does this kind of curve. And we need to draw her hair in front of the bat. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll just extend the hair. Let me hide my underdrawing so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. We'll indicate her eye line, her nose line. And the eye line's a little bit higher. This is just the general placement of her eyes, nose, and mouth. Not super worried about the details just yet. So let's clean up some of this excess stuff here. And let's see if we need to make any adjustments. Looks like I need to lengthen her leg just a little bit. So I'll just move this like so. And you can always add your own poses, expressions, whatever you feel. You're just using this as a guide. If your character has a different type of hairstyle, you can always work that in, looking at various references. And I'm not focusing on any details at this stage, just focusing on basically capturing the proportions. And now what I'll do is, so if that's my second stab at it, my third stab would be, okay, I need to still lengthen her a little bit. So let's make a copy. Okay. There we go. And so now I've got something that looks proportional. And from here, this is where the fun begins. Now that I've got her basic pose, let's go ahead and customize this character. I'll taper the character's hair a little bit more, make it more dynamic. Remember, things like jackets are going to overlap. Like this is the area where the jacket gets a little bit tighter around her hand. for things like drawing hands, something that I've stolen from other artists, and all artists basically steal from each other. Anyone tells you they don't, it's lying, because that's how you get influenced. I don't draw the entire lines, I just leave a little bit of a gap there. This is like the opening. Now, because I've drawn through the form, I can draw this bat with some confidence. And why is it important to draw through the form? Because that way things connect up the way they should. It doesn't look like the bat has a different entry and an exit point. Sometimes you'll see that when you don't draw through the form, especially when you're drawing characters that have dresses. Very easy for the legs to appear in a spot where they probably wouldn't if you were to draw through the form. So let's now, she's got some tears in her jean. Notice how this boot kind of overhangs. Again, volumetric shapes. There's like a heel. I'm just going to extend this leg a little bit more because I feel like I think it just looks cooler. So I'm actually fixing stuff as I go. And this is just how I work, you know. It's, is it wrong? Is it bad? I mean, I'll let you be the judge of that, but you know, this is just how an artist works. So now I've got something that I think I can work with. I can go ahead and clean up. I can add some shading elements. For example, the area around her crotch area, that's going to be somewhat darker. So what I'll do is kind of indicate those areas here. There's a little bit of rim lighting going on back here. It's super dark. And here we can see some folds. Those folds actually have some overlap. Even the boots have some creases on them too. I'll just go ahead and simplify the boot. Gotta close my gaps here. I'm just going to block in the basic areas of light. And of course her entire jacket is dark, so in an effort to see some of her upper arm, I'll add some of those highlights in. There's a lot of highlights up here. This area is dark. And then the area underneath her neck is dark. And so I've got something that basically can work. Now the little dots here, I can always come back in with white. And I can go ahead and finish that one out. Let me go back and get her hair. Like there's some dark areas here. So the really dark areas are going to be black, and then as we start to get into different shades of gray, we'll start to use our hatching. And then for areas that are considered to be lighter, I won't put as much emphasis on that because I want that to look like it's light. Let's get that thumb in there. So that's how I take a drawing from reference to something that's a little bit more custom. I can always come back in with my lasso tool to add things like, you know, the zippers and other details, but that's just, another thing that you can also add. It looks like she actually has a hoodie. I think that's what that little bump is. So I'll go ahead and put that in there too. So if you found this video to be useful, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. As always, thanks for subscribing. We just hit the 700 subscriber milestone. I do appreciate you sharing the videos with others. Please let a friend know if they're trying to get better at digital drawing. As always, thanks for watching the videos. I'll see you in the next one.